Close your eyes if you haven't already. Take a slow breath. Feel the weight of your body against whatever surface holds you. In this moment, as you listen to these words, something extraordinary is happening inside your skull. Something so complex, so intricate, that we're only beginning to understand its depths. Tonight we're going inside the 3 pounds of tissue that makes you, inside the quiet mind. The brain is perhaps the most remarkable structure in the known universe. While you rest here, while you breathe and listen and begin to let go of the day, your brain continues its endless work. It processes these words. It regulates your heartbeat. It maintains your breath. It does all of this and so much more without you ever having to ask, without you even having to think about it. What we're about to explore together are facts, yes, but more than that, they're pieces of a larger story. The story of what you are, of how consciousness emerges from chemistry, of how thought arises from electricity, of how the most powerful computer ever created fits inside your head, works constantly, and somehow, miraculously, gives rise to the experience of being alive. So settle in. Let your breathing slow. Let your mind open. Over the next hour, I'll share with you 100 gentle truths about the brain, not as a list, but as a journey inward to the place where all journeys begin. Let's start with the basics, with what the brain actually is. The brain sits at the center of something called the nervous system, a vast network of communication pathways that extends throughout your entire body. But the brain itself, the command center, rests protected inside your skull, cushioned by fluid, surrounded by bone, kept safe from the outside world. It needs this protection because despite all its power, despite everything it can do, the brain is surprisingly delicate. If you could hold a human brain in your hands, you'd be surprised by its weight. 3 pounds, roughly. About the same as a small cantaloupe, though far more precious. And what is it made of? Mostly fat and water. The very substance of consciousness, the thing that allows you to think and feel and remember and dream, is built from the simplest materials, fat and water, arranged in the most complex pattern we know of. Here's something that might surprise you. The brain itself has no pain receptors. The organ that allows you to feel pain everywhere else in your body cannot feel pain itself. You could touch a brain directly, and it wouldn't hurt. Of course, the tissue surrounding it, the membranes and blood vessels, those can hurt. But the brain itself exists in a kind of numb silence, processing the pain signals from everywhere else while feeling nothing itself. What does the brain do? The question seems simple, but the answer is everything. It controls your thoughts, obviously. But it also controls your movements, from the tiniest twitch of your finger to the complex dance of walking. It regulates your breathing, keeping you alive even when you're not thinking about it. It maintains your heartbeat, that steady rhythm that continues whether you're awake or asleep. The brain operates continuously, from the moment you're born until the moment you die, never stopping, never resting completely. And how does it do all this? Through signals. The brain uses both electrical and chemical signals, a constant conversation conducted in the language of ions and molecules. These signals travel along pathways, jump across gaps, trigger responses, create chains of cause and effect that happen faster than conscious thought. Through all this signaling, through all this communication, the brain keeps your body in balance. Temperature, blood pressure, hormone levels, all monitored and adjusted, all kept within the narrow ranges that allow life to continue. Now let's go deeper. Let's talk about the cells that make all of this possible. Inside your brain, at this very moment, are billions upon billions of cells called neurons. Billions. The number is so vast it's hard to comprehend. Each neuron is a tiny processor, a microscopic computer designed to do one thing: transmit information. They're the building blocks of thought, the fundamental units of consciousness. A neuron receives signals from other neurons, processes those signals, and if the right conditions are met, fires its own signal down a long tail called an axon. This signal travels as an electrical impulse, a wave of charged particles rushing along the neuron's length. But neurons don't actually touch each other. Between them are tiny gaps called synapses, spaces too small to see but critically important. When the electrical impulse reaches the end of a neuron, it triggers the release of chemicals. These chemical messengers drift across the synapse, that microscopic gap, and bind to receptors on the next neuron. This is how information crosses from one cell to another. Electricity becomes chemistry, becomes electricity again, over and over, billions of times per second. These synapses, these connection points between neurons, are where learning happens. Every time you form a memory, every time you learn something new, new connections form, existing connections strengthen. The physical structure of your brain changes, reshapes itself, becomes something slightly different than it was before. This is happening constantly, even now as you listen to these words. Your brain is forming new connections, strengthening pathways, literally changing its own structure. But neurons aren't alone in there. They're actually outnumbered by other types of cells, support cells with names like astrocytes and oligodendrocytes and microglia. These cells don't transmit signals the way neurons do. Instead, they protect neurons, nourish them, clean up cellular debris, provide insulation for signal transmission. They're the infrastructure, the support system that allows neurons to do their work. All these cells, neurons and support cells together, work as networks. No single neuron acts alone. Everything the brain does emerges from patterns of activity across thousands, or millions, or billions of cells, all firing in coordination, all contributing to a larger whole. And this communication, this constant signaling, never fully stops. Even in the deepest sleep, even in coma, there is always some level of activity, some background hum of neural conversation. To do all this work, the brain needs fuel. It needs energy, and it uses a lot of it. Despite making up only about 2% of your body's weight, your brain consumes roughly 20% of the body's oxygen. 1/5 of every breath you take goes to feed your brain. It's an energy-hungry organ, constantly demanding fuel, constantly burning through resources. That fuel comes in the form of glucose, a simple sugar carried through your bloodstream. The brain requires constant blood, flow, a steady supply of oxygen and glucose delivered through a dense network of blood vessels. These vessels branch and branch again, forming a web so intricate that no brain cell is far from a blood supply. Even during sleep, the brain's energy use remains high. You might think it would slow down, conserve resources, but it doesn't. The brain during sleep is almost as active as the brain during waking, just active in different ways. It's processing, consolidating, organizing, maintaining. Sleep is not rest for the brain so much as a different kind of work. Here's the thing though, the brain cannot store energy. Unlike muscles, which can store glucose as glycogen, the brain has no reserves. It depends entirely on continuous supply. Even a brief interruption in blood flow causes problems. Seconds without oxygen and brain cells begin to suffer. Minutes and permanent damage occurs. The brain's power is matched by its vulnerability. To ensure this constant supply, blood flow through, the brain adjusts based on activity. When one region of the brain works harder, blood flow to that region increases. It's a beautiful system of supply and demand, of resources directed where they're needed most. And all of this happens automatically, controlled by mechanisms so sophisticated we're still working to understand them completely. Balance is carefully maintained, every moment of every day. Now that we understand the fuel, let's look at the structure. Let's explore the different parts of the brain and what each one does. The brain has multiple regions, each with its own specialties, its own responsibilities. At the highest level is the cerebrum, the largest part of the brain, the wrinkled outer layer you probably picture when you think of a brain. This is where thinking happens. Reasoning, planning, imagination. All the higher cognitive functions arise from the cerebrum. Below and behind the cerebrum sits a smaller structure called the cerebellum. Its name means little. Brain. And it looks like a miniature version of the cerebrum, complete with its own wrinkled surface. The cerebellum coordinates movement, helps you maintain balance, allows you to perform complex physical tasks without thinking about every tiny muscle contraction. At the base of the brain, connecting it to the spinal cord, is the brainstem. This ancient structure, evolutionarily old and absolutely essential, controls vital functions. Breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, the automatic processes that keep you alive, all managed here. The cerebrum itself divides into lobes, each processing different types of information. The frontal lobes, at the front of your head behind your forehead, handle planning and decision-making and personality. The parietal lobes, on top and toward the back, process touch and spatial awareness. The temporal lobes, on the sides near your temples, handle sound and certain aspects of memory. And the occipital lobes at the very back of your head process vision. Vision, interestingly, is processed in the back of the brain, as far from your eyes as possible. Light enters your eyes, but you see with the back of your head. Sound enters your ears on the sides, and the processing happens on the sides as well, in the temporal lobes. Touch is mapped across the surface of the brain, with different regions corresponding to different parts of your body. Your hands and face take up disproportionately large areas, reflecting their sensitivity. Movement follows a similar pattern, a map laid out across the brain. But here's something fascinating. This map is mirrored. The left side of your brain controls the right side of your body, and vice versa. The signals cross over somewhere in the brainstem, creating this reversed arrangement. When damage occurs to a specific part of the brain, specific abilities are affected. A stroke in the visual processing area can cause blindness, even though the eyes themselves work fine. Damage to language areas can rob someone of the ability to speak or understand words. But there's redundancy built into the system. Functions overlap for safety, and the brain has something called plasticity, an ability to adapt. If one area is damaged, sometimes other areas can learn to compensate, taking over functions they didn't originally perform. Despite all these specialized regions, despite all this division of labor, the brain works as a whole. The regions communicate constantly, sharing information, coordinating responses. A simple task like recognizing a friend's face and saying hello involves dozens of brain regions working in millisecond precise coordination. Nothing in the brain happens in isolation. Let's talk now about learning and memory, about how the brain changes itself through experience. The brain learns by forming connections between neurons. When two neurons fire together repeatedly, the connection between them strengthens. This is the fundamental mechanism of learning, simple in principle but profound in its implications. Everything you know, every skill you have, every memory you carry, exists as a pattern of strengthened connections. Repetition strengthens these pathways. Practice a skill, and the neural pathway supporting that skill becomes more efficient. Signals travel faster, the action becomes easier. This is why practice matters, why repetition works. You're literally changing the physical structure of your brain. But where are memories stored? Not in any single place. Memories are stored across networks of neurons distributed throughout the brain. A single memory might involve connections between thousands of cells in multiple regions. Visual aspects stored in one place, emotional content in another, contextual information somewhere else, all linked together into a unified whole. Emotional memories tend to be stronger than neutral ones. The brain prioritizes information that has emotional significance, that matters to survival or well-being. Evolution has shaped us to remember threats and rewards more clearly than mundane details. This is why you can remember embarrassing moments from years ago with painful clarity, while forgetting what you had for lunch last Tuesday. Sleep plays a crucial role in memory. During sleep, particularly during the deeper stages, the brain consolidates memories, moving them from temporary storage to more permanent networks. It's as if the brain reviews the day's experiences, deciding what to keep and what to discard, integrating new information with old knowledge. Learning something and then sleeping on it genuinely helps you remember it better. But forgetting is natural too, even healthy. The brain filters information constantly, deciding what's worth storing and what can be let go. Not all experiences need to be remembered. In fact, the ability to forget irrelevant details is just as important as the ability to remember important ones. A brain that remembered everything would be overwhelmed, paralyzed by the weight of useless information. Here's something interesting about memory. Each time you recall a memory, you change it slightly. The act of remembering is also an act of reconstruction. Your brain pieces the memory together from distributed fragments, and in doing so, it can introduce small changes, subtle distortions. This is why eyewitness testimony can be unreliable, why siblings remember the same childhood events differently. Memory is not playback, it's reconstruction, and reconstruction is imperfect. The good news is that learning continues throughout life. The old idea that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, that the brain becomes fixed and unchangeable in adulthood, is simply wrong. New skills reshape the brain at any age. The changes might happen a bit more slowly in older brains, but they happen. Plasticity persists, and certain things boost learning. Curiosity, for instance, improves retention. When you're genuinely interested in something, when you want to know more, your brain releases chemicals that strengthen memory formation. Learning is easier when you care about the subject. Conversely, stress can impair memory. High levels of stress hormones interfere with the hippocampus, a brain structure crucial for forming new memories. But calm, a state of relaxed attention, improves learning. This is why studying while anxious is difficult, why taking breaks helps, why sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to stop thinking about it directly and let your mind wander. Now let's explore emotions and feelings, those internal states that colour every moment of experience. Emotions arise from brain activity, from patterns of neural firing and the release of chemical messengers. These chemicals, neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin and norepinephrine, influence mood and motivation and how you feel from moment to moment. When people talk about a chemical imbalance affecting mood, this is what they mean. The balance of these signaling molecules shapes emotional experience. Here's something remarkable about emotions. The brain often reacts before conscious thought catches up. You can feel afraid before you consciously realize there's something to fear. This makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. Faster reactions mean better survival. The pathways for processing fear, for triggering the fight or flight response, are ancient and rapid. They can initiate a response in milliseconds. Calm responses, on the other hand, take longer. They require input from the prefrontal cortex, the reasoning part of the brain, and those signals take more time to process. This is why it's easy to react emotionally in the moment but harder to respond thoughtfully. The fast emotional pathways get there first. But emotions aren't just automatic reactions. They guide decision-making in important ways. People with damage to emotion processing areas of the brain often struggle to make even simple decisions, spending hours weighing options without being able to choose. Emotions provide a kind of value signal, a gut feeling about whether something is good or bad, safe or dangerous. Pure logic alone is often insufficient for making choices. We need emotions to help us decide. Of course, balance is important. Too much emotion, and you're overwhelmed, unable to think clearly. Too little, and you're adrift, lacking the motivation or value judgments needed to act. The brain seeks a middle ground, a state where emotion and reason work together. At a fundamental level, the brain seeks safety. It's constantly scanning for threats, constantly evaluating whether you're okay or in danger. This is not paranoia. It's a basic function of survival, but familiarity reduces stress. Things you know, patterns you recognize, people you trust, these register as safe, allowing the brain to relax its vigilance slightly. This is one reason why routine provides comfort. Predictability feels safe. The brain doesn't have to work as hard to assess every situation as potentially threatening. As we move deeper into the night, let's talk about sleep itself, about what happens in the brain when consciousness fades. The brain remains active during sleep. It doesn't shut off, doesn't go dark. Instead, it shifts into different patterns of activity, different rhythms of neural firing. Sleep occurs in cycles, each lasting about an hour and a half, moving through stages from light sleep to deep sleep and back again. Dreams happen mostly during a stage called REM sleep, which stands for rapid eye movement. During REM sleep, your eyes move rapidly beneath closed lids. Your brain activity looks almost like waking activity, but your muscles are paralyzed to prevent you from acting out your dreams. It's a strange state. a kind of active sleep where the brain is busy but the body is still. What's the brain doing during sleep? Many things. It processes emotions, particularly during REM sleep. Difficult feelings from the day are reviewed, integrated, sometimes resolved. This is why sleep can improve emotional regulation, why things that seemed overwhelming at night might feel manageable in the morning. The brain has had time to process, to put things in perspective. Memory organization also occurs during sleep. The brain sorts through the day's experiences, deciding what to consolidate into long-term memory and what to let fade. It strengthens important connections, prunes away unnecessary ones, essentially tidying up its own networks. The brain also clears waste during sleep. There's a system called the glymphatic system that becomes more active during sleep, flushing away metabolic waste products that build up during waking hours. It's like the brain's cleaning crew comes in at night, removing cellular garbage, preparing for another day of activity. All this activity during sleep has real benefits. Sleep improves focus and attention. It enhances problem-solving ability. It supports immune function. Lack of sleep, on the other hand, affects mood, making people more irritable, more emotionally reactive, less able to regulate their feelings. It impairs judgment and decision-making. It slows reaction time. Sleep is not a luxury. It's essential for health, for the brain to function properly. The brain anticipates sleep rhythms through something called the circadian clock, an internal timer that tracks the 24-hour day. This clock influences when you feel sleepy and when you feel alert. It's synchronized to light, particularly to the blue wavelengths present in daylight. Darkness signals rest to the brain, triggering the release of melatonin, a hormone that promotes sleep. Light, especially in the evening, can interfere with this system, delaying sleep, reducing its quality. Even short naps can help. A brief period of rest, just 20 or 30 minutes, can restore alertness, improve mood, enhance performance on cognitive tasks. The brain thrives on rest, on these periods of reduced demand where it can consolidate, organize, recover. As you listen to this now, as you drift closer to sleep yourself, know that your brain is preparing for this essential work. It's getting ready to consolidate the memories of your day, to process your emotions, to clear away the accumulated waste of waking metabolism, to restore itself for tomorrow. Let's talk now about change and adaptation, about the brain's remarkable ability to rewire itself. The brain can rewire itself. This property, called neuroplasticity, exists at all ages. It's strongest in childhood, when the brain is developing rapidly, but it never fully goes away. Even in old age, the brain retains some capacity to form new connections, to adapt to new circumstances. Injury can trigger adaptation. If a stroke damages one area, sometimes nearby areas can take over some of the lost functions. This recovery isn't always complete, but it demonstrates the brain's flexibility, its drive to maintain function however it can. Rehabilitation after brain injury works by encouraging this adaptive process, by practicing skills until new pathways form to support them. Every time you learn something, you create physical change in your brain. It's not metaphorical, it's literal. The connections between neurons strengthen, the insulation around signal-carrying axons thickens, the efficiency of signal transmission improves, learning reshapes the brain structure. Habits work the same way. Do something repeatedly, and the neural pathways supporting that action become stronger, more automatic. This is why habits are hard to break. The pathways are deeply ingrained, activated easily, requiring little conscious effort. But it's also why new habits can form with enough repetition. You're literally building new pathways, strengthening new connections until they become the default. Even thoughts and mental practices can affect brain structure. Studies of people who practice mindfulness meditation show changes in brain regions associated with attention and emotional regulation. Paying attention in a particular way, training your mind to focus or to observe thoughts without judgment, these mental exercises have physical effects. The brain adapts to how you use it. Stress reshapes responses too, though not always in beneficial ways. Chronic stress can actually shrink certain brain structures, particularly the hippocampus. It can alter the balance of neurotransmitters, affect the growth of new neurons, change how the brain processes threat and safety. But here's the hopeful part. Calm can be trained. Practices that reduce stress, that promote relaxation, can reverse some of these changes. The brain's plasticity works in both directions. Change is gradual though. You can't expect your brain to rewire overnight. New pathways take time to form, weeks or months of consistent practice. Old patterns take time to fade, but gradually, persistently, change happens. The brain responds to how you use it, becoming better at whatever you practice, whether that's a physical skill, a mental habit, or an emotional pattern. This flexibility, this capacity for change, is what has allowed humans to survive and thrive. We're not born with instincts for every situation. Instead, we're born with brains that can learn, that can adapt to whatever environment they find themselves in. Flexibility supports survival. As we near the end of our journey, let's zoom out and look at the brain through time, through the vast sweep of evolutionary history. The brain evolved over millions of years, shaped by natural selection, refined by countless generations. The basic structure, the division into forebrain and midbrain and hindbrain, the use of neurons and chemical signaling, these are ancient, shared with many other animals. But the human brain, particularly the cerebrum, has expanded dramatically. Our capacity for abstract thought, for language, for imagining future scenarios, these set us apart. Human brains are highly adaptable, more adaptable than our closest primate relatives, more capable of learning new skills, of creating culture, of transmitting knowledge across generations. This adaptability is both our greatest strength and our vulnerability. We can learn almost anything, but we start out knowing almost nothing. Human infants are helpless for years, their brains still developing, still wiring themselves based on experience. Culture shapes brain development in profound ways. The language you learn as a child affects how your brain processes sound. The skills you practice, the values you internalize, the ways of thinking you adopt, all of these shape neural pathways. In a very real sense, culture gets inside your head, becomes part of your brain structure. This is why people from different cultures can think differently. It's not just belief, it's physical differences in how brains are wired. Every brain is unique. Even identical twins with the same genes develop different neural patterns based on their different experiences. Your brain is yours alone, shaped by your unique history, your particular combination of genetics and experience. No two brains are exactly alike, and we're still learning. Despite everything neuroscience has discovered, despite all we now know about neurons and neurotransmitters and brain regions and functions, the brain remains mysterious in many ways. How exactly does consciousness arise from neural activity? We don't fully know. How are memories encoded at the molecular level? We're still piecing it together. How can we better treat brain diseases, prevent neurodegeneration, enhance cognitive function? These are active areas of research, questions we're working to answer. But even without complete understanding, even with mysteries remaining, we know enough to marvel. The brain is an extraordinary thing. It created language, mathematics, art, music. It built civilizations. It sent humans to the moon. It wrote symphonies and poems. It discovered the structure of DNA, split the atom, photographed distant galaxies. And it did all of this while also managing the mundane but essential tasks of keeping bodies alive, of regulating heartbeat and breath and temperature and balance. Your brain does all of this. Right now, even as you rest here, even as you listen and drift and feel your eyelids growing heavy, your brain continues its quiet work. Monitoring, regulating, maintaining, processing these words, perhaps forming memories of this moment, perhaps already beginning to let go, to sink into the different patterns of sleep. The brain continues working quietly, always. Thoughts slow naturally as sleep approaches. The constant stream of consciousness that fills your waking hours begins to fragment, to lose its coherence. You might notice your thoughts becoming dreamlike, less logical, more associative. This is normal. This is your brain, shifting modes, moving from the alert focus of waking to the processing and restoration of sleep. Awareness softens. The boundary between self and environment becomes less distinct. Sounds that seemed clear grow distant. The weight of your body, which you were so conscious of earlier, fades from attention. You're not disappearing, you're transitioning. Your brain is guiding you into a different state, a necessary state, a healing state. Let yourself rest now. Let your brain do its work. All that processing, all that organizing and consolidating and cleaning and restoring, it happens without your conscious effort. You don't need to manage it. Your brain knows what to do. It's been doing this since you were born, every night, guiding you into sleep and back out again into waking. Trust it. Trust the process. Trust the 3 pounds of fat and water and electrical signals that somehow, miraculously, create your experience of being alive. The facts we've explored tonight, they're not just information. They're a map of inner space, a guide to the most complex object we've ever encountered. And that object is you, is the part of you that thinks and feels and remembers and dreams. So rest now. Let the knowledge settle. Let your thoughts drift. Let your breathing slow and deepen. Let the brain do what it does best, what it's been doing for millions of years of evolution, what it will continue to do every night for the rest of your life. Guide you home to sleep, fade into darkness, into quiet, into rest. Before we begin tonight's journey, if you're enjoying this content, using hype points on this video helps the channel more than you possibly know. It truly makes a difference in reaching more listeners like yourself. If you're listening on Spotify, leaving a review helps us out so much. And if you'd like, comment what time it is for you and where in the world you're listening from. We absolutely love seeing where everyone is tuning in from across the globe. Finally, if you enjoy this content, subscribing keeps you connected to more stories like this one. Now let's begin. The desert wind moves differently at night. Across the Giza Plateau, where sand meets stone and silence becomes almost tangible, 3 monuments rise against the darkness. They've stood here for longer than most civilizations have existed. They've watched empires emerge and collapse. They've outlasted languages, religions, entire ways of understanding the world. Tonight we're going to walk slowly through the story of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Not the rush tour guide version, not the sensational documentary promising impossible secrets. Just a calm, methodical exploration of what we actually know about the last surviving wonder of the ancient world. Picture yourself standing on the plateau as the sun sets, the heat of the day finally releasing its grip on the sand. The Great Pyramid looms before you, massive beyond easy comprehension, its surface rough and weathered by millennia. This is where we begin our journey through time, through human ambition, through the intersection of faith and engineering that created something genuinely eternal. The temperature drops as darkness approaches. In the desert, the transition from day to night happens quickly, dramatically. One moment the stones are radiating accumulated heat, the next they're cool to the touch. The sky transforms from pale blue to deep indigo, and stars begin to emerge, the same stars that guided the builders who created this monument. We're going to explore every dimension of this structure. Each detail reveals something about the people who built this, the civilization that demanded it, and the mystery that still surrounds it. We'll walk through its history, its construction, its purpose, and its legacy. We'll descend into its hidden chambers and climb through its narrow passages. We'll examine what we know and acknowledge what remains unknown. Let's start at the beginning, in a world so different from ours that it requires imagination just to glimpse it. A world where the Nile flooded predictably each year, where the pharaoh was literally divine, where death wasn't an ending but a transformation into something greater. Chapter 1. The world before the pyramid context itself is where we must begin. The Great Pyramid was built during Egypt's 4th dynasty, a period known as the Old Kingdom. When Egyptian civilization had already been thriving for centuries, this wasn't the dawn of their culture. This was their golden age, their moment of supreme confidence and capability. The Nile Valley during this period was unlike anywhere else on Earth. Annual floods deposited rich silt across the farmland, creating abundance that freed people to pursue specialization. Farmers, yes, but also scribes, priests, craftsmen, administrators, engineers. A complex society with sophisticated bureaucracy, advanced mathematics, and deep religious traditions. The pyramids at Giza were not the first pyramids Egypt had built. By the time Khufu commissioned his great monument, Egyptian engineers had been refining pyramid construction for generations. They had learned from earlier attempts, both successful and failed. The bent pyramid at Dashur shows where angles were adjusted mid-construction. The pyramid at Meidum reveals what happens when outer casing stones aren't properly supported. Each previous structure taught lessons that informed what would be built at Giza. The name we need to remember is Khufu. In Greek histories he's called Cheops, but to his people he was Khufu, the second pharaoh of the 4th dynasty. He ruled sometime around 2600 years before the Common Era, though exact dates remain debated by scholars who work with fragmentary records and astronomical calculations. What isn't debated is his ambition, his vision, his determination to create something unprecedented. Khufu inherited a stable kingdom from his father Sneferu, who had himself built multiple pyramids. The dynasty was at its peak, with resources flowing into the royal treasury, a well-organized administrative system, and the accumulated knowledge of previous generations of builders. Khufu had the means, the expertise, and the divine mandate to attempt something extraordinary. But to understand why the pyramid exists, you must understand how ancient Egyptians viewed their kings. This wasn't a matter of politics or governance as we understand those concepts. Pharaohs weren't simply political leaders who happened to enjoy luxurious lifestyles and commanded armies. They were living gods, divine intermediaries between the mortal realm and the eternal one. When a pharaoh spoke, it was the voice of divinity made manifest in human form. The pharaoh maintained Ma'at, the cosmic order that kept chaos at bay. Without the pharaoh, the Nile might not flood, the sun might not rise, the stars might cease their orderly procession across the sky. This wasn't metaphor to the ancient Egyptians. This was understood as literal truth, as fundamental to the functioning of reality as gravity is to our understanding of the universe. When a pharaoh died, he didn't simply cease to exist, didn't merely become a memory or a corpse. He transformed, became one with the gods, particularly with Ra, the sun god who travelled across the sky each day in his solar bark, bringing light and life to the world. The pharaoh's death was his apotheosis, his assumption into the divine realm where he would continue to serve as a bridge between worlds. This belief explains something that otherwise seems inexplicable. If a pharaoh was divine, his tomb wasn't just a burial place, wasn't simply a container for a body. It was a transformation chamber, a cosmic launch pad, a permanent dwelling for a god. This explains why Egyptian royalty poured resources into tombs that dwarfed their palaces. The palace was temporary, a place for the brief mortal phase of a divine existence. The tomb was forever, or at least as close to forever as human effort could achieve. Look beyond just Khufu's pyramid for a moment. The entire Giza plateau became a sacred landscape over the course of several generations. Eventually it would hold 3 major pyramids, multiple smaller pyramids for queens, temples both mortuary and valley, causeways connecting these elements, and an entire infrastructure dedicated to the afterlife. This was a city for the dead, but also a factory for eternity, a place where the living laboured to ensure the divine order continued beyond death. Mortuary temples at the pyramid's bases served as interfaces between the living and the dead. Priests performed daily rituals, offerings of food and incense, recitations of sacred texts. These weren't symbolic gestures. The Egyptians believed the pharaoh's spirit needed these offerings, that the rituals sustained the transformed god-king in his eternal existence. The pyramid shape itself wasn't arbitrary. It wasn't chosen simply because it was stable or impressive. The form represented the primordial mound that emerged from the waters of chaos at creation. according to Egyptian mythology. In the beginning, there was only none, the primordial ocean, formless and dark. From these waters rose the first land, the first solid thing in existence, and from this mound the creator god Atum brought forth all of creation. Every pyramid echoed this cosmic moment of creation. But pyramids also represented something else, something visible in the sky. They were stone representations of the sun's rays breaking through clouds, creating a stairway between earth and heaven. Stand in the desert when storm clouds gather and you'll see them, those dramatic rays of light piercing through, creating visible paths from sky to ground. The pyramid made these rays permanent, made them solid, made them a reliable path for the pharaoh's soul to ascend. Every angle had meaning. Every orientation served purpose. Nothing about the pyramid's design was random or merely aesthetic. The slope of the sides, the alignment of the corners, the positioning on the plateau, all of these emerged from careful planning that integrated mathematical precision with spiritual significance. The pyramid required years of preparation before a single stone was quarried. Site selection came first. Why this particular spot on the plateau? Visibility certainly, bedrock quality absolutely, but also astronomical considerations, ritual appropriateness, symbolic meaning. The ancient Egyptians approached this project with the same methodical precision that modern engineers would recognize, just with different tools and different motivations. Astronomical observations determined orientation. Priests and astronomers spent nights watching the stars, marking their positions, calculating alignments. Landscape surveys mapped the terrain and calculated volumes. Scribes recorded measurements, tracked resources, projected timelines. Resource calculations determined how much stone would be needed, how many workers, how much food to feed them, how many tools would wear out and need replacement. Labour organisation required creating entirely new administrative structures. Overseer positions needed to be created and filled. Supply chains had to be established. Living quarters for workers had to be built. Bakeries and breweries had to be constructed to feed the workforce. The pyramids shaped Egypt before construction even began. While we can't pinpoint the exact year construction began, we know it was during Khufu's reign, which lasted approximately 23 years according to ancient king lists. Some estimates suggest the pyramid took 20 to 30 years to complete, which means planning likely began before Khufu even took the throne, during his father's reign, when succession was being prepared and the young prince was learning what would be expected of him. This wasn't just about creating something big, it wasn't about vanity or showing off. It was about creating something perfect, something that would speak to eternity about Egyptian capability, about divine order, about the triumph of Ma'at over chaos. Ma'at was the Egyptian concept of cosmic order and balance, truth and justice, the fundamental rightness of things. The pyramid embodied Ma'at in stone, imposed order onto the landscape, created permanence in a world of change. By the time the first stone was laid, this project had already changed Egypt. It had required reorganization of labor patterns, development of new techniques, creation of infrastructure for transport and logistics. The pyramid shaped the civilization even before it shaped the skyline, demanded innovations that would outlast the construction itself. Chapter 2: A mountain built by humans. When you first see it in person, the scale hits you physically. The Great Pyramid originally stood 481 feet tall. To put that gently in perspective, it remained the tallest human-made structure on Earth for over 3,800 years. Think about that. 38 centuries of human progress, and nothing surpassed it until medieval European cathedrals finally exceeded its height. Try to imagine that span of time. The pyramid was already ancient when the Parthenon was built in Athens. It was already a tourist attraction when Rome was founding its empire. It had stood for over 2,000 years before the first words of the New Testament were written. And through all that time, through the rise and fall of countless civilizations, it remained the tallest thing humans had ever built. Today, the pyramid stands at 455 feet. The difference represents the loss of the pyramidion, the capstone that once crowned the structure, along with settling and erosion over millennia. Even diminished, it dominates the landscape. Modern Cairo has grown around it, buildings creeping closer to the plateau's edge, but the pyramid still commands attention. You can see it from miles away, rising above the urban sprawl. To truly grasp the scale, you need to walk around it. Each side of the base measures approximately 756 feet. The pyramid covers just over 13 acres of desert. To visualize this, imagine walking the perimeter. At a casual pace, it would take you nearly 15 minutes to circle the structure once. 15 minutes of walking past uninterrupted stone and you're back where you started. Stand at one corner and try to see the opposite corner. You can't. The distance is too great, the perspective too vast. The pyramid doesn't just occupy space, it defines it, creates its own gravitational center on the landscape. Those four base sides aren't just roughly equal, they're equal to within inches across lengths of more than 700 feet. The base is almost perfectly level, with variations measured in fractions of an inch. This level of accuracy, achieved without modern instruments, without laser levels or GPS, without even the magnetic compass, remains genuinely remarkable. The surveyors who laid out the pyramid's foundation worked with water levels, measuring rods and astronomical observations. They created a platform so level that modern instruments struggle to detect variations. On a structure covering 13 acres, this precision borders on the inexplicable. The pyramid contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, with a total mass estimated at around 5.9 million tons. To compare, that's roughly the weight of 16 Empire State Buildings. It's a mountain of stone, assembled block by block, each piece cut, transported and positioned with care. Think about that number, 2.3 million blocks. If you spent 1 second looking at each block, it would take you over 26 days of continuous observation to see them all. And the ancient Egyptians didn't just look at them. They quarried them, shaped them, moved them, and placed them. The average block weighs about 2.5 tons, roughly the weight of a large SUV, but this average conceals variation. Some blocks weigh less than a ton, others weigh significantly more. The pyramid isn't uniform. Its interior contains chambers, passages, and structural features that require different stone sizes. The largest granite blocks, used in the king's chamber and the relieving chambers above it, weigh between 25 and 80 tons each. These massive pieces of stone weren't placed at ground level where you could simply roll or slide them into position. They were lifted and positioned high within the structure's interior, fitted with extraordinary precision. Imagine moving an 80-ton granite block. That's heavier than most modern trucks. Now imagine lifting it 100 feet into the air and positioning it exactly where it needs to be, aligning it perfectly with adjacent blocks. The ancient Egyptians did this repeatedly, without cranes, without hydraulics, without any of the machinery we consider essential for such work. The blocks fit together with joints so tight that you often can't slip a piece of paper between them. This wasn't achieved with mortar filling gaps. The stones themselves were cut and placed with extraordinary precision. Run your hand along a joint between blocks and you'll feel how seamlessly they meet. The precision is tactile, physical, undeniable. From its completion around 2560 BCE until Lincoln Cathedral's central tower was completed in 1311 CE, no structure exceeded the Great Pyramid's height. That's 3,871 years of supremacy. No other building in history has held that record for anywhere close to that length of time. The pyramid defined the limits of human architectural ambition for millennia. The pyramid's internal volume has been calculated at around 2.6 million cubic meters. It's mostly solid stone, with relatively small interior spaces comprising the passages and chambers. The ratio of solid mass to empty space is extraordinary. This isn't a hollow shell, it's a mountain, with narrow corridors carved through it. The pyramid's faces rise at an angle of 51 degrees, 51 minutes. This specific angle wasn't chosen randomly. It relates to both aesthetic proportions and structural stability, creating a profile that has successfully supported the massive weight above for over 4,000 years. Steeper, and the structure might be unstable. Shallower, and it would cover an impossibly large footprint. This angle represents the optimal solution to multiple engineering challenges. Each face of the pyramid covers about 5.5 acres of sloping stone. Originally, with the polished casing stones in place, these faces would have presented smooth, nearly seamless surfaces reflecting sunlight like mirrors. Imagine 5.5 acres of polished white limestone tilted at 51 degrees catching the Egyptian sun. The visual effect would have been overwhelming. The ratio of the pyramid's perimeter to its height approximates 2 times pi, a mathematical constant. Whether this was intentional or coincidental remains debated, but it demonstrates the sophisticated geometric understanding of the builders. Even if they didn't conceptualize pi as we do, they clearly understood the relationships between angles, heights, and perimeters. The pyramid has survived major earthquakes that destroyed other structures in the region. Its form, with a broad base and tapering sides, distributes weight efficiently and provides inherent seismic resistance. When the ground shakes, the pyramid flexes slightly, absorbing and dissipating energy. Its mass provides stability, its shape provides strength. All this mass, all this precision, all this scale required not just vision but practical solutions to impossible-seeming problems. How do you actually build such a thing? How do you organize the work? How do you move the stones? How do you ensure accuracy? These questions lead us to the next chapter, to the practical realities of construction. Chapter 3. How stone became structure. The bulk of the pyramid's limestone came from quarries located right on the Giza plateau itself. The ancient Egyptians didn't transport millions of tons of stone from distant locations. They cut it from the bedrock beneath and around the construction site. You can still see the quarry marks. In the plateau's surface, evidence of where stone was systematically removed. These quarries became part of the construction site's landscape. As workers cut blocks from the ground, they created depressions, channels, ramps. The plateau was reshaped by the act of building, transformed from natural bedrock into a worked landscape of human intention. While local limestone formed the pyramid's core and most of its mass, 2 special types of stone came from elsewhere. White Tura limestone used for the exterior casing was quarried across the Nile River and transported by barge during the annual flood when the river was high. Red Aswan granite, used for the king's chamber and internal structural elements, came from quarries over 500 miles to the south, a journey that would have taken weeks. The transport of Aswan granite represents a logistical achievement almost as impressive as the pyramid itself. These massive blocks had to be cut from living rock in Upper Egypt, loaded onto barges capable of supporting enormous weight, floated hundreds of miles down the Nile, offloaded at Giza, and then moved from the river to the plateau and up into position within the pyramid's interior. For the local limestone, workers cut blocks free from the bedrock, then moved them using wooden sledges pulled by teams of men. Recent experiments have demonstrated that wetting the sand in front of the sledges reduced friction dramatically, making it possible to move massive stones with human power alone. Water transformed sand from an impediment into a lubricant. This technique appears simple, but represents sophisticated understanding of physics. The workers knew that dry sand would create friction, causing the sledge to dig in and resist movement. Wet sand, however, compacts and smooths, allowing the sledge to glide. Ancient tomb paintings show workers pouring water in front of sledges, depicting this technique in action. The pyramid wasn't built by slaves. Evidence from worker villages, graffiti left by construction crews, and analysis of burial sites indicates the labourers were paid workers, organised into rotating shifts. Many were farmers who worked on the pyramid during flood season, when agricultural work was impossible. They came to Giza, laboured for a period, and then returned to their farms. This wasn't forced labour. This was organised public works, a civic duty that also provided wages and purpose during the agricultural off-season. Calculations based on the number of stones, the time available, and the physical limitations of the work suggest a permanent workforce of around 20,000 to 30,000 people, with possible peak periods employing more. This workforce would have included not just stone movers but also quarrymen, tool makers, rope manufacturers, carpenters, supervisors, scribes, bakers, brewers, and countless other specializations. The pyramid required an entire support economy. Crews had names, left graffiti, proclaiming their achievements, and appear to have engaged in friendly competition. One crew called themselves Friends of Khufu. Another was Drunkards of Menkaure. These weren't anonymous slaves toiling in misery. They were organized teams with identity and pride, workers who saw themselves as part of something greater than themselves. The graffiti they left inside the pyramid, marks invisible to anyone not exploring the structure's interior spaces, reveals their pride. They marked which crew had placed which blocks, recorded their names, left evidence of their existence. These marks weren't for public display, they were for themselves, for their gods, for eternity. Archaeological excavations have uncovered worker villages near the pyramid site, complete with bakeries, breweries, workshops, and sleeping quarters. These workers ate well, primarily bread, beer, and meat, suggesting they were valued, not exploited. The bakeries could produce enough bread to feed thousands. The breweries produced beer, which was a staple beverage safer to drink than water. Evidence suggests workers received medical care, with healed fractures showing treatment and recovery periods. The primary stone-cutting tools were copper chisels and saws, along with stone hammers. Copper is soft compared to modern steel, requiring frequent sharpening and replacement, but it was sufficient for cutting limestone when combined with abrasive sand. Workers would saw into limestone using copper blades, pouring sand and water into the cut to create an abrasive slurry that did the actual cutting. For harder stones like granite, different techniques were necessary. Workers used dolerite hammerstones, extraordinarily hard igneous rock, to pound and shape granite blocks. This was slow, painstaking work, but effective. The precision achieved in granite cutting, particularly in the King's Chamber, demonstrates mastery of the material. To achieve the tight joints between blocks, workers likely used a method of repeatedly placing stones, marking high points with red ochre, removing the stone, grinding down the marked areas, and repeating until the fit was perfect. This trial and error approach requires patience, but produces remarkable results. Analysis shows that thin layers of gypsum mortar were used between some stones, but not to hold them together. The mortar served more as a lubricant during positioning, and may have helped with fine adjustments. The weight of the stones above provides the real structural bond. Once in place, the blocks don't need mortar. Gravity and precision do the work. How the Egyptians lifted stones to increasing heights remains partially uncertain, but most theories involve some form of ramping system. Straight ramps extending from ground level to the pyramid's top would require enormous amounts of material and would need to be lengthened as the pyramid rose. Spiral ramps wrapping around the pyramid's exterior could work but would complicate. Corner construction. Internal ramps built into the pyramid structure remain possible but unproven. Evidence exists for all these approaches, suggesting the Egyptians may have used different methods at different stages of construction. Pragmatism likely trumped dogmatic adherence to a single technique. If one approach worked better for a particular challenge, they used it. Despite everything we know, significant questions remain about specific construction techniques. The absence of detailed construction records from the period means we're often working backward from the finished product, deducing methods from results. This isn't failure of archaeology. This is the nature of studying a civilization that didn't document their building techniques because they were common knowledge at the time. The pyramid's construction required not just labour, but logistics, coordination, resource management and planning that would challenge modern project managers. Feeding 30,000 workers daily meant producing thousands of loaves of bread and gallons of beer every day. Maintaining tool supplies required a steady production of copper implements. Coordinating stone delivery from multiple quarries demanded scheduling and communication systems. If the pyramid took 20 years to complete and contains 2.3 million blocks, workers would have needed to place approximately 315 blocks per day, every day, for 2 decades. This seems impossible until you remember this wasn't sequential. Multiple teams worked simultaneously on different sections. Different quarries provided stone concurrently. The project progressed on many fronts at once. All this effort, all this organisation, all this daily labour over decades served not just to create mass, but to create alignment, to achieve something beyond mere construction. The pyramid wasn't just big, it was oriented, aligned, positioned according to principles that connected earth to sky. Chapter 4: Order in the Stars. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with an accuracy of about 4 arc minutes, or 1/15th of a single degree. This precision exceeded the capabilities of compasses, which the ancient Egyptians didn't possess. They achieved this alignment through careful observation of the stars, a technique that required patience, mathematical understanding, and sophisticated astronomical knowledge. The most likely method involved observing circumpolar stars, stars that never set below the horizon as they wheel around the celestial pole. By tracking a star's rising and setting points on an artificial horizon and bisecting the angle between them, ancient astronomers could determine true north with extraordinary accuracy. This required building observation platforms, marking positions, performing calculations, and checking results multiple times. Some researchers have proposed that the 3 pyramids of Giza align with the 3 stars of Orion's belt, a constellation, the Egyptians associated with Osiris, god of the afterlife. While this correlation has been debated and remains controversial in academic circles, the Egyptians definitely viewed the sky as a map of the divine realm. Stars weren't just points of light, they were gods, destinations, the architecture of heaven. The 4 faces of the pyramid align precisely with the 4 cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. This ensured the structure harmonized with the sun's daily journey across the sky, reinforcing the connection between the pharaoh and the sun god Ra. Each face caught the sun at different times, creating a daily cycle of light and shadow that echoed the sun god's journey. 2 narrow shafts extend from the king's chamber, one pointing north, one south. Similar shafts exist in the queen's chamber, though these don't extend all the way through the pyramid's masonry. These weren't ventilation shafts in any practical sense. Air circulation wasn't necessary in a tomb. They appear to have had astronomical or spiritual significance, possibly representing pathways for the pharaoh's soul to ascend to specific stars. The southern shaft from the king's chamber, when the pyramid was built, pointed directly at Al-Nitak, the brightest star in Orion's belt during its culmination at the meridian. Whether this was intentional remains debated, but the precision of the alignment is undeniable. The shaft isn't just vaguely pointing south. It's aimed at a specific celestial target. The northern shaft from the king's chamber, at the time of construction, aligned with Thuban, then the pole star in the constellation Draco. This alignment would change over time due to Earth's axial precession, the slow wobble of our planet's rotation that causes the position of the pole star to shift over thousands of years. This makes the shaft a timestamp, evidence of exactly when the pyramid was built. The Egyptian concept of Ma'at, cosmic order and balance, pervades every aspect of the pyramid's design. The precise alignments weren't just technical achievements, weren't simply the result of engineers showing off their skills. They represented the imposition of divine order onto the physical world, ensuring the structure harmonized with eternal cosmic patterns. The pyramid was meant to function not just as a building, but as a cosmological instrument, a physical embodiment of the relationship between earth and heaven. While we can measure these alignments precisely today using modern instruments, we can't always know their exact significance to the ancient builders. We're looking at their choices through our modern understanding of astronomy, which may not fully capture their spiritual and cosmological framework. They saw meaning in the stars that goes beyond our cataloguing of positions and magnitudes. We've examined the pyramid from outside, traced its connections to earth and sky, explored its relationship to cosmic order. Now it's time to enter to explore the hidden chambers carved into millions of tons of stone, to walk passages that have existed in darkness for millennia. Chapter 5: Inside the Pyramid. The original entrance is located on the north face, about 55 feet above ground level. This wasn't the entrance tourists use today. That was created by workers digging for treasure in the 9th century, breaking through the masonry in an attempt to reach whatever riches they imagined lay within. The hole they created bypasses the pyramid's original entrance system, providing direct access to the interior. From the original entrance, a narrow corridor slopes downward at an angle of 26 degrees, cutting first through the pyramid's masonry, then through the bedrock beneath. This passage is only about 3.5 feet tall, forcing anyone traversing it to stoop or crawl. The walls are smooth, the angle constant, the construction precise even in this hidden space where no one was meant to see. The descending passage eventually opens into a rough-cut chamber carved from bedrock, located about 90 feet below the pyramid's base. This chamber appears unfinished, with an irregular floor and a shaft descending even deeper into the bedrock, extending down into darkness. Its purpose remains unclear. Was it abandoned when plans changed? Was it always meant to be unfinished, representing the underworld's chaos in contrast to the finished chambers above? We don't know. About 60 feet from the entrance, a different passage branches upward from the descending corridor, also at an angle of 26 degrees, but climbing into the pyramid's interior rather than descending beneath it. For centuries, this passage was concealed by a fitted stone plug, hiding the pyramid's true interior from anyone who entered through the north face. The passage was invisible, a secret route to chambers above. The ascending passage is narrow and low, barely allowing passage, maintaining the same uncomfortable dimensions as the descending corridor. You can't walk upright, you can't move quickly. Every foot of progress requires effort and attention. But this passage climbs toward the pyramid's heart, rising through solid masonry toward something extraordinary. The ascending passage opens into the Grand Gallery, one of the ancient world's most remarkable architectural achievements. This corbelled passage soars 28 feet high, while maintaining the same upward angle as the ascending passage. The walls step inward as they rise, creating a narrow ceiling despite the impressive height. The effect is cathedral-like, unexpected in a space that spends most of its existence in complete darkness. The Grand Gallery's function remains debated. Some theories suggest it housed sliding granite blocks that would seal the ascending passage after the pharaoh's burial. Others propose it served a ceremonial function during the pyramid's construction and consecration. The space feels too grand, too carefully constructed to serve a purely utilitarian purpose, yet its exact role in the pyramid's design eludes certain explanation. At the top of the Grand Gallery, through a narrow antechamber with granite portcullis blocks that could have sealed the chamber beyond, lies the king's chamber. This room measures about 34 feet long, 17 feet wide and 19 feet tall. Every surface is lined with red Aswan granite, brought from quarries over 500 miles to the south. The stone's polished surface catches light, reflects sound, creates an environment unlike anywhere else in the pyramid. In the king's chamber sits a rectangular granite box, slightly larger than a human body, with one corner broken. This is assumed to be Khufu's sarcophagus, though no body or burial goods have ever been found within the pyramid. The lid is missing. The interior is empty. Whether it was robbed in antiquity or never used remains unknown. Some argue the pyramid was looted before historical records began. Others suggest it never functioned as a tomb at all, that its purpose was symbolic or ceremonial rather than practical. Unlike the treasure-filled tomb of Tutankhamun discovered by Howard Carter in the Valley of the Kings, the Great Pyramid has yielded no mummy, no grave goods, no definitive proof it ever served as an actual burial site. This absence has fueled centuries of speculation about the pyramid's true purpose, spawning theories ranging from astronomical observatory to power plant to grain storage. The simplest explanation remains that it was robbed thoroughly in antiquity, but the complete absence of evidence makes certainty impossible. Returning to the ascending passage, taking a different route this time, we find a horizontal passage branching off about halfway up. This leads to what's known as the Queen's Chamber, though no evidence suggests it was intended for a queen. The name is a modern convention based on mistaken assumptions about Egyptian burial practices. The Queen's Chamber sits almost exactly on the pyramid's east-west centerline. It measures about 17 feet square and 20 feet tall, with a pointed corbelled ceiling similar in construction to the Grand Gallery, though much smaller in scale. A niche is cut into the eastern wall, its purpose unknown. Was it meant to hold a statue, an offering? Did it serve some function we can't reconstruct from the empty cavity that remains? The floor of the Queen's Chamber remains rough and unlevelled, suggesting the chamber may have been abandoned before completion. Whether this represents a change in plans, an intentional choice to leave it unfinished, or simply work interrupted by Khufu's death and burial, we cannot say with certainty. Above the King's Chamber, explorers in the early 19th century discovered 5 additional chambers stacked vertically. These weren't designed for access. There are no entrances from the normal passage system. They were discovered by breaking through from the Grand Gallery, creating holes in the masonry to see what lay beyond. These chambers serve as stress-relieving structures, distributing the immense weight of the pyramid above so it doesn't crush the King's Chamber below. The relieving chambers are constructed of massive granite beams laid horizontally, creating open spaces between them. The topmost chamber has a pointed limestone roof, designed to deflect weight outward to the pyramid's sides. Together, these chambers have protected the King's Chamber from collapse for over 4,000 years. Without them, the weight would have crushed the chamber below, reducing it to rubble. The King's Chamber has unusual acoustic properties. Sound resonates within the granite walls in specific ways, creating harmonics and echoes that transform simple sounds into something more complex. Whether this was intentional or coincidental remains debated. Some researchers have experimented with chanting and musical instruments in the chamber, noting unusual resonances. Did ancient Egyptians use this space for ritual purposes involving sound? We can only speculate. We've explored the interior, walked the passages, stood in the chambers, but we've only seen the pyramid as it exists today, stripped of its original covering, weathered by millennia. To understand how it once appeared, we must reconstruct what was lost. Chapter 6. The Lost Skin of Light. Originally, the entire structure was covered in polished white Tura limestone casing stones. These weren't rough blocks like those visible today, weren't the weathered stepped surfaces that tourists photograph. They were precisely cut, polished to a near-mirror finish, and fitted together with joints measured in fractions of an inch. The pyramid wasn't rough, it was smooth. The visual effect of the polished casing would have been transformative. When new, the pyramid didn't look like a stepped stone structure, didn't reveal the internal construction. It appeared as a smooth, gleaming surface, its polished faces reflecting sunlight with eye-searing intensity. Early observers described it as appearing to be made of light itself, a beacon visible for miles. Imagine sunrise at Giza. As the sun crested the eastern horizon, the pyramid's eastern face would catch the first rays, transforming into a blazing triangle of reflected light. The effect would have been visible for miles across the Nile Delta, announcing the presence of divine power made manifest in stone. As the sun climbed, different faces would catch the light, creating a daily cycle of illumination that echoed the sun god's journey. In the clear desert air, the polished pyramid would have been visible from extraordinary distances. Travellers approaching Cairo from any direction would have seen the pyramids long before reaching them, their white surfaces standing in stark contrast to the golden desert sand. They would have appeared to float above the horizon, shimmering in the heat haze, otherworldly in their perfection. The casing stones came from Tura, a limestone quarry across the Nile from Giza. Tura limestone is finer grained and whiter than the local limestone, making it ideal for a polished finish. Transporting these precisely cut stones across the river and up to the pyramid site represented a significant logistical achievement. Each stone had to be protected during transport to prevent damage to its polished surface. Over centuries, and particularly after a major earthquake in the 14th century loosened many casing stones, the polished covering was systematically stripped away. Medieval builders used the fine limestone to construct mosques and buildings in Cairo. The pyramid became a quarry, its outer skin harvested to build other structures. What took decades to construct was dismantled over centuries of opportunistic stone harvesting. A few casing stones remain in place at the pyramid's base, protected by accumulated debris and fallen blocks. These fragments allow us to see the original surface treatment, confirm descriptions from earlier observers, demonstrate the precision of the cutting and polishing. Running your hand along one of these surviving stones, you can feel how smooth it is, how carefully finished, how different from the rough core blocks now exposed. The pyramidion, the capstone that once crowned the pyramid, was likely covered in gold or electrum, a gold-silver alloy. This would have made the pyramid's peak shine even more brilliantly than its white sides, marking the convergence point of the four faces and the symbolic link between earth and heaven. The golden cap would have caught the sun's first and last rays each day, visible as a point of light long before the rest of the pyramid emerged from darkness. The casing stones weren't just cut and polished. Each one was shaped to fit its specific position on the pyramid's face, accounting for the slight curve of each face and ensuring the smooth transition from base to apex. This required mathematical calculation for each stone's angle and precise execution in cutting. Each of the approximately 144,000 casing stones was unique. Stripped of its casing, the pyramid looks ancient, weathered, mysterious in its roughness. But we must remember, for most of its existence, it looked new, intentional, triumphant. What we see today is the skeleton, the core exposed. What the ancients saw was the finished achievement, perfect and gleaming, a monument that announced Egyptian power and divine order to anyone who saw it. The transformation from polished magnificence to rough pyramid took centuries, happening gradually as stone was removed for other projects. By the time Napoleon saw the pyramids in 1798, they already looked much as they do today. Their covering long gone, their original appearance preserved only in written descriptions and the few fragments still clinging to the base. Chapter 7. Misunderstood. For centuries, the pyramid wasn't built by slaves. This misconception, popularized by ancient historians like Herodotus, who visited Egypt 2,000 years after construction, and reinforced by biblical narratives and Hollywood films, contradicts all archaeological evidence. The builders were skilled workers, compensated for their labor, proud of their achievement. The persistence of this myth says more about later cultures' assumptions than about ancient Egyptian reality. The precision and scale of the pyramid have led some to claim it couldn't have been built by ancient humans and must represent alien intervention or lost advanced civilizations. These claims ignore both the archaeological evidence of Egyptian capability and rest on the assumption that ancient non-European peoples couldn't achieve sophisticated engineering. The pyramid is impressive precisely because humans built it, because it represents what organized, sustained human effort can accomplish. When classical Greek and Roman civilizations encountered the pyramids, Egypt's pyramid-building age was already more ancient to them than Rome is to us. They marveled at the structures, but often misunderstood their purpose, ascribing them to vanity and hubris rather than religious devotion. Herodotus recorded stories about Khufu that portrayed him as a tyrant who enslaved his people, narratives that tell us more about Greek assumptions than Egyptian reality. During the Islamic medieval period, some believed the pyramids contained vast treasures or ancient wisdom preserved from before the Great Flood. This led to multiple attempts to break into them, including the creation of the entrance tourists use today, forced through the masonry in search of riches that didn't exist. These treasure hunters did permanent damage, creating passages that bypass the pyramid's original entrance system. Various claims assert the pyramid encodes pi, the golden ratio phi, the speed of light, the Earth's dimensions, or other constants. While some proportional relationships exist, attributing modern mathematical constants to ancient builders requires selective measurement and often ignores the evidence of how such proportions actually arose from practical building decisions and aesthetic choices rather than intentional encoding of universal constants. The ratio of the pyramid's perimeter to its height approximates 2 times pi. However, this can arise naturally from using a rolling drum to measure and establish the angle, a technique that would have been available to ancient builders without requiring knowledge of pi as an abstract constant. The relationship is real, but it doesn't necessarily indicate intentional encoding of mathematical knowledge. Some claim the pyramid's proportions reflect the golden ratio, phi, a number found throughout nature and art. While certain measurements create ratios close to phi, these can be explained by the pyramid's angle and the geometric properties that angle creates, rather than intentional encoding. The Egyptians had sophisticated mathematical knowledge, but we must be careful about projecting our mathematical concepts onto their design choices. Serious scientific study of the pyramids began in the 19th century, when scholars like Jean-François Champollion's decipherment of hieroglyphics allowed researchers to actually read ancient Egyptian texts. This transformed understanding from speculation to evidence-based analysis. For the first time, researchers could read what Egyptians wrote about themselves, their beliefs, their practices. The 20th century brought systematic excavation, careful documentation, and scientific analysis. Rather than seeking treasure or mysteries, researchers focused on understanding the pyramids in their cultural and historical context. Excavations of worker villages, analysis of tools and techniques, study of contemporary texts and records, all built a comprehensive picture of how and why the pyramids were built. Despite centuries of study, significant questions remain. This doesn't validate wild theories or suggest hidden knowledge. It simply reflects the reality that ancient Egypt predates detailed written construction records, leaving us to deduce techniques from physical evidence and fragmentary texts. Mystery isn't proof of the impossible. It's just the natural state of studying the distant past. Chapter 8. Modern Discoveries. In recent decades, researchers have begun using non-invasive scanning techniques to study the pyramid's interior without drilling or damaging the structure. These methods include muon radiography, which uses cosmic ray particles to create density maps, infrared thermography, which reveals temperature variations indicating hidden chambers, and three-dimensional laser scanning, which creates precise models of the pyramid's geometry. The Scan Pyramids project, beginning in 2015, used cosmic ray muon detectors to create images of the pyramid's internal density. Muons are particles created when cosmic rays strike Earth's atmosphere. They penetrate stone but are partially absorbed based on density, allowing researchers to map internal voids. The technique is slow, requiring months of data collection, but completely non-invasive. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids team announced the detection of a large void above the Grand Gallery. This space, approximately 100 feet long, was previously unknown. Its purpose and contents remain mysterious, as it's inaccessible without creating new passages through the pyramid, something researchers are unwilling to do. The void exists. We know its approximate size and location. What it contains remains unknown. Small robots have been sent through the narrow shafts extending from the King's Chamber and Queen's Chamber, carrying cameras to document areas humans can't reach. These explorations have revealed previously unknown chambers and features, small spaces carved into the pyramid's interior. Each discovery raises new questions about the pyramid's design and purpose. The robots exploring the shafts from the Queen's Chamber encountered stone doors with copper handles. When carefully drilled and explored, these led to small spaces, then additional doors. What lies beyond remains unknown. Each answer reveals new mysteries, new spaces we didn't know existed. Modern archaeology moves slowly, prioritizing preservation over discovery. Each intervention must be carefully planned to minimize damage. This means some mysteries may remain unsolved for years or decades until technology advances sufficiently. We could find answers faster if we were willing to break through walls and drill into chambers, but the cost would be irreversible damage to an irreplaceable structure. New discoveries in Egypt continue regularly, not just at Giza, but throughout the Nile Valley. Ancient settlements, quarries, worker villages, and texts continue to emerge from the sand, each adding pieces to our understanding of the civilization that built the pyramids. Each new tomb discovered, each papyrus translated, each settlement excavated, adds context to the pyramids themselves. The pyramids of Giza, along with the entire Memphis necropolis, were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1979. This classification provides international protection and recognises the pyramids as heritage belonging to all humanity, not just Egypt. The designation comes with responsibilities for preservation and careful management. Millions of people visit the pyramids annually, creating both economic benefit and conservation challenges. Balancing access with protection requires constant effort. Human presence accelerates deterioration through humidity from breath, erosion from touch, simple physical contact. Managing tourism while preserving the monuments requires ongoing vigilance and careful planning. Desert conditions have preserved the pyramids better than any other environment could, but they're not immune to environmental damage. Wind erosion gradually wears away exposed surfaces. Salt crystallization, when rare moisture penetrates the stone and then evaporates, can crack and crumble the limestone. Occasional rain, though rare, can cause damage. Temperature fluctuations between scorching days and cool nights create expansion and contraction that slowly wears the stone. Chapter 9. The Pyramid Today. The Great Pyramid has stood for over 4,500 years. It predates classical Greece by 2,000 years. It was already ancient when Rome was founded. It stood finished for over 1,000 years before the first books of the Hebrew Bible were written. Try to grasp that span of time. 45 centuries, more than half of recorded human history. The pyramid has survived countless earthquakes, including major tremors that destroyed other structures in the region. Its form provides inherent stability, and the precision of its construction has allowed it to flex and settle without catastrophic failure. When the ground shakes, the pyramid absorbs the energy, moves slightly, then settles back into stability. Its mass is its protection. Despite modern Cairo's expansion, despite the sprawl of buildings that now reach nearly to the plateau's edge, the pyramid still dominates the landscape. From many parts of Cairo, you can look up and see it, exactly where it's always been, unchanged while everything around it transforms. The city grows, changes, rebuilds itself generation after generation, while the pyramid remains. The pyramid represents many things to many people: ancient achievement, human ambition, religious devotion, engineering triumph, historical mystery. It's been called the machine of eternity, the mountain of light, the throne of Pharaoh. But perhaps most fundamentally, it's evidence that humans, working together with purpose and dedication, can create something that transcends their individual lifespans and speaks across millennia. Tonight, the desert wind still moves across the Giza Plateau. The stars wheel overhead in patterns that have shifted since the pyramid was new. The pole star no longer where it was when those astronomical shafts were aimed. Sand accumulates and is blown away, accumulates again. The sun rises, blazes across the sky, and sets as it has done more than 1.6 million times since the final block was placed. The pyramid doesn't need us to understand it. It doesn't require our theories or our amazement. It existed for thousands of years before modern archaeology, and it will exist long after we're gone. But we're drawn to it anyway, generation after generation, seeking meaning in its massive permanence, finding questions in its precise angles. As you drift towards sleep tonight, imagine standing at the pyramid's base as darkness settles completely. The rough stone rises above you, each block, representing countless hours of human effort. Somewhere within, the king's chamber sits empty, sealed in darkness, unchanged since the last torch was extinguished millennia ago. The grand gallery angles upward through millions of tons of stone. The shafts point towards stars that have shifted in the sky. The pyramid keeps its secrets, not out of malice or mystery, but simply because it is stone. It cannot speak, it can only stand. And in standing, it reminds us that humans, for all our limitations, for all our brief individual existence, can create something that outlasts empire, outlasts language, outlasts everything but time itself. The desert wind continues its eternal movement across the sand. The pyramid remains, exactly where it has always been, exactly what it has always been, a monument to belief, to effort, to the uniquely human drive to create something eternal. Rest now. The pyramid has stood for 45 centuries. It will still be standing when you wake. Before we descend into the deepest darkness on Earth, if you're enjoying this journey into the abyss, please use your hype points on this video. It helps the channel grow in ways you possibly cannot imagine. If you're listening on Spotify, leaving a review makes an enormous difference for us. And if you feel like it, drop a comment telling us what time it is where you are and where in the world you're listening from. We absolutely love seeing where everyone is tuning in from across the globe, and if you enjoy this kind of content, consider subscribing. It means everything to us. Now, close your eyes. Imagine you're floating on the surface of the Pacific Ocean. The water beneath you stretches down into a darkness so complete, so absolute, that it swallows even the concept of light. Somewhere below, hidden beneath more than 10 kilometers of water, lies a place where the Earth itself folds inward. A scar in the ocean floor so deep that if you dropped Mount Everest into it, the peak would still be submerged beneath more than a kilometre of water. This is the Mariana Trench. Tonight, we're going to descend together into that impossible darkness. We'll move slowly, carefully, discovering 100 facts about the deepest place on Earth, a realm of crushing pressure, eternal night, and strange life that exists where nothing should survive. This isn't a race. This is a gentle fall through the layers of the ocean, each fact taking us deeper into a world that feels more like another planet than a part of our own. Let the surface world fade above you. Let the light dissolve. We're going down. Chapter 1. Where the Trench is. The Mariana Trench lies in the western Pacific Ocean, far from the sight of any casual sailor, hidden beneath waters that appear deceptively calm from above. The surface gives no hint of the incredible depth below. It stretches east of the Mariana Islands, a chain of volcanic peaks that form the visible remnants of the same geological forces that created the trench itself. These islands are like sentinels, marking the boundary of the abyss. The trench is positioned thousands of kilometers from any major continent, isolated in one of the most remote regions of the Pacific, where the ocean feels vast and eternal. Ships can pass overhead without ever knowing what lies beneath. It extends for more than 2,500 kilometers, making it longer than many countries are wide. To put this in perspective, it's roughly the distance from New York to Denver, except this distance is carved into the ocean floor. If you were to drive the length of the trench at highway speeds, it would take you an entire day without stopping. But of course, no road exists here, only water and darkness. The trench curves in a gentle arc, following the boundary where two massive tectonic plates meet and grind against one another. This curve is visible on maps, a crescent-shaped scar in the seafloor. At its deepest point, the trench plunges, nearly 11 kilometers below sea level, deeper than Mount Everest is tall. If you could place the world's tallest mountain at the bottom of the trench, its summit would still be covered by more than 2 kilometers of water. The walls of the trench are steep and narrow, creating a geological canyon unlike anything found on land. The slopes descend at dramatic angles, forming a V-shaped cross-section that concentrates the depth. Most of the trench remains unexplored, its depths visited by only a handful of submersibles in all of human history. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the floor of the Mariana Trench. Above the trench, the ocean's surface appears no different than any other patch of the Pacific, calm, blue, and utterly unaware of the abyss beneath. Birds fly overhead, fish swim in the sunlit waters, and nothing suggests the incredible depth below. Chapter 2: How it formed. The Mariana Trench was born from the slow, inexorable movement of tectonic plates, the massive slabs of rock that form Earth's outer shell. These plates drift across the planet's surface at rates measured in centimeters per year. Here, the Pacific Plate meets the smaller Mariana Plate, and rather than colliding head-on, one slides beneath the other in a process that has been ongoing for tens of millions of years. This process is called subduction, and it's one of the most powerful geological forces on Earth. Subduction zones are where the planet's surface is actively being destroyed and recycled. As the Pacific Plate descends, the ocean crust bends downward, creating the characteristic V-shape of the trench. The bending creates enormous stresses in the rock, leading to earthquakes and volcanic activity. The trench has been deepening for millions of years, grain by grain, centimetre by centimetre, as the plates continue their ancient dance. Every year, the Pacific Plate moves a few more centimetres into the mantle. Deep beneath the seafloor, the descending plate is recycled back into Earth's mantle, melting and eventually returning to the surface as new volcanic rock. This is part of the planet's grand cycle of creation and destruction. This cycle of creation and destruction is part of plate tectonics, the process that shapes continents, builds mountains, and opens oceans. Without subduction zones like the Mariana Trench, Earth would look entirely different. The area around the trench experiences frequent earthquakes as the plates grind and slip against one another. These earthquakes can be massive, though most occur deep underground where they cause little damage to the surface world. The shape of the trench is not fixed. It changes slowly over geological time, shifting and deepening as the Earth continues to evolve. In a million years, the trench may be even deeper than it is today. The trench is still forming today, even as you listen to these words, even as you drift towards sleep. The plates continue their slow collision, and the trench continues to deepen, millimetre by millimetre. Chapter 3: Extreme Depth. The deepest known point in the Mariana Trench is called Challenger Deep, named after the British survey ship that first measured its astounding depth in the 19th century. It remains the deepest surveyed point in all the world's oceans. Challenger Deep lies nearly 11 kilometres below the ocean's surface, a distance so great it defies easy comprehension. To visualise it, imagine stacking 10 Empire State Buildings on top of one another and submerging them completely. The pressure at the bottom of Challenger Deep exceeds 1,000 times the atmospheric pressure at sea level. Every square centimetre of surface experiences more than 1,000 kilograms of force. This pressure would instantly crush most human-made objects, collapsing them as if they were made of paper. Submarines designed for moderate depths would be compressed into twisted metal in seconds. A single square inch of surface at the bottom of the trench experiences more than 8 tons of pressure. That's equivalent to having 3 cars stacked on top of your thumbnail. Yet the water itself remains liquid, compressed, but not frozen, existing in a state that seems impossible. Water at such pressures has unusual properties. It's denser, heavier, and behaves differently than surface water. The temperature near the bottom hovers just above freezing, kept stable by the constant crushing pressure. The water temperature is typically around 1 to 4 degrees Celsius, cold enough to preserve anything that falls to the bottom. No sunlight reaches the bottom of the trench. The darkness here is absolute, unbroken by even a single photon from the surface. Light is absorbed completely by the water column above, filtered out layer by layer. The water is remarkably still at such depths. Currents move slowly, gently, barely disturbing the sediment. What motion exists is measured in centimetres per hour rather than the meters per second common at the surface. Time seems to move differently in the trench, without light, without seasons, Without the rhythms of surface life, the deep ocean exists in a kind of eternal present. A day is indistinguishable from a year. Sound travels differently here. The pressure changes how water transmits vibrations, making the trench both silent and full of strange, distant echoes. Low-frequency sounds can travel for hundreds of kilometers through the deep ocean. The silence is not empty, it's heavy, thick with pressure, a silence that has weight and substance. If you could somehow survive in the trench without protection, you would feel the silence pressing against your skin. The environment is stable in ways the surface can never be. While storms rage above, while hurricanes churn the surface waters into chaos, the bottom remains unchanged, undisturbed. The trench is unforgiving. It does not accommodate human presence easily. Every visit requires extraordinary technology and courage, and even then, the margin for error is razor thin. Yet despite all this, despite the darkness, the pressure, the cold, life exists here. Life finds a way, adapting to conditions that would seem to make existence impossible. Chapter 4. Life in the Trench. When scientists first explored the deepest parts of the ocean, they expected to find nothing. The prevailing theory was that the pressure and darkness would make life impossible. They were spectacularly wrong. Life thrives in the Mariana Trench, not in spite of the extreme conditions, but in many ways because of them. The isolation and stability have allowed unique ecosystems to develop over millions of years. The organisms here survive without sunlight, relying instead on chemical energy from hydrothermal vents and organic matter that drifts down from above. This is called chemosynthesis, and it forms the basis of deep-sea food webs. Many species in the trench are translucent, their bodies nearly invisible in the blackness, adapted to a world where being seen means danger. Some are so transparent that their internal organs are visible through their skin. Some creatures lack eyes entirely. In a place where light never reaches, eyes are unnecessary, evolutionary baggage that evolution has discarded. Instead, these organisms rely on touch, chemical sensing, and vibration detection. The bodies of deep-sea organisms are soft and flexible, their tissues designed to exist in equilibrium with the crushing pressure around them. They have no air spaces in their bodies, nothing that could be compressed or crushed. These creatures are not crushed by the pressure, because the pressure exists inside their bodies as well as outside. They are part of the deep, not visitors to it. If you brought them to the surface, they would die as the pressure dropped. Metabolism in the trench is extraordinarily slow. With food scarce and energy precious, life here operates at a fraction of the speed of surface organisms. Some deep-sea fish live for decades, growing slowly, reproducing rarely. Most food in the trench comes from above, drifting down as marine snow, a constant gentle rain of dead plankton, feces, and organic debris. This material can take weeks to reach the bottom, decomposing as it falls. This falling food is the foundation of the trench ecosystem, connecting the surface world to the abyss through a slow cascade of nutrients. What falls as waste above becomes sustenance below. Creatures in the trench move slowly, conserving energy, their movements deliberate and economical. A scavenger might spend hours approaching a piece of food, moving with glacial patience. Predation is rare. With so little energy available, the cost of hunting often outweighs the benefit. Most deep-sea animals are scavengers or filter feeders, waiting for food to come to them. Survival here is a matter of efficiency, patience, and adaptation honed over millions of years. Every calorie counts, every movement must be justified, every strategy must maximize the chance of survival. The ecosystem of the trench is quiet. No birds call, no mammals breach, no schools of fish dart through the water. Only the silent drift of falling particles and the slow pulse of deep-sea life. Life in the Mariana Trench is a testament to the stubborn persistence of biology, proof that given enough time, evolution will find a way into even the most hostile environments imaginable. Chapter 5. Bioluminescence and Adaptation. In the eternal darkness of the trench, some creatures have learned to make their own light. This ability, called bioluminescence, is one of the most remarkable adaptations in the deep ocean. Bioluminescence, the production of light through chemical reactions, is common in the deep ocean, though less so at the extreme depths of the trench. The deepest parts are too dark and too energy poor for even light production to be common. The light produced by deep-sea organisms is soft and brief, appearing as flashes or glows in the darkness. It's nothing like the harsh light of the sun, more like the glow of fireflies on a summer night. This light serves multiple purposes: communication between individuals, attracting prey into striking range, or confusing predators with sudden flashes that create false targets in the darkness. Some creatures use bioluminescence as camouflage, matching the faint light filtering from above to hide their silhouettes from predators below. This strategy, called counter-illumination, makes them invisible from beneath. The colours of bioluminescent light in the deep ocean differ from what we see on land. Most is blue or green, wavelengths that travel farthest through water and are most visible in the darkness. Red light is almost useless in the deep ocean. Water absorbs red wavelengths quickly, making red invisible beyond shallow depths. In the deep sea, red objects appear black. Some deep-sea predators have evolved the rare ability to produce red light, effectively creating a private spotlight that their prey cannot see. They hunt with invisible illumination. The adaptations found in trench organisms are ancient, refined over countless generations in an environment that has remained stable for millions of years. These are some of the oldest evolutionary strategies on Earth. Evolution in the deep ocean favours patience. In a world of scarcity, the survivors are not the fastest or strongest, but the most efficient. Those who can wait, who can survive on almost nothing, who can endure. Chapter 6. Human Discovery. The Mariana Trench was discovered through soundings, measurements taken by lowering weighted lines to the seafloor and calculating depth by how much line was released. Early explorers used thousands of meters of rope, counting fathoms as they descended. Modern measurements use sonar, bouncing sound waves off the ocean floor and timing their return to calculate depth with precision. Sonar revealed the true extent of the trench, mapping its contours in detail. The first crewed descent to Challenger Deep occurred in 1960, when two explorers descended in a bathyscaphe named Trieste. They spent only 20 minutes on the bottom before ascending, but those minutes changed our understanding of the ocean. Only a handful of humans have ever visited the deepest point in the ocean, fewer people than have walked on the moon. The deep ocean remains less explored than space. Most exploration of the trench is conducted by robotic probes, remotely operated vehicles that can withstand pressures no human vessel can tolerate. These robots are our eyes in the abyss. Exploration of the trench is extraordinarily difficult. Every mission requires years of planning, specialized equipment, and immense funding. A single dive can cost millions of dollars. The equipment used to explore the trench must be built to tolerate pressure that would flatten steel like aluminum foil. Spherical pressure. Hulls made of titanium or specialized glass are used to protect delicate instruments. Missions to the trench are rare. Even with modern technology, the deep ocean remains one of the least accessible places on Earth. More people summit Mount Everest in a single year than have ever visited Challenger Deep. The data collected from the trench is limited, fragmentary, like trying to understand an entire continent from a handful of photographs. Every sample, every image, every measurement is precious. Much of the Mariana Trench remains unknown. We have better maps of the surface of Mars than we do of our own ocean floor. The deep sea is our final frontier, and we've barely begun to explore it. Chapter 7. Challenger Deep. Challenger. Deep is named after HMS Challenger, the British research vessel that conducted the first systematic survey of the world's oceans in the 1870s. That expedition transformed oceanography from speculation into science. Challenger Deep is located at the southern end of the Mariana Trench, the absolute lowest point in the entire ocean. It's as low as you can go on planet Earth without drilling into the seafloor. The seafloor at Challenger Deep is not dramatic or jagged. It's surprisingly smooth, covered in a thick layer of fine sediment that has accumulated over millions of years. The bottom is soft, almost muddy. No towering cliffs or dramatic formations mark the deepest point, just a gentle basin, unremarkable except for its depth. If you could somehow drain the ocean, Challenger Deep would look like a shallow depression in an otherwise flat plain. The sediment at the bottom is composed of the remains of countless organisms that have drifted down from above over millions of years. Each grain represents something that once lived in the sunlit waters far above. Life has been observed even at Challenger Deep. Amphipods, small shrimp-like creatures, have been filmed scavenging on the seafloor. Fish have been recorded at depths previously thought impossible for vertebrates. In recent years, plastic debris has been found at Challenger Deep, a sobering reminder that human impact reaches even the most remote places on Earth. Even the deepest ocean is not immune to pollution. Samples collected from Challenger Deep contain microorganisms uniquely adapted to the extreme environment, many of them unknown to science. These bacteria may hold clues to the limits of life itself. Every visit to Challenger Deep reveals something new, something unexpected, proof that we have barely begun to understand the deep ocean. Each expedition raises more questions than it answers. Secrets remain buried in the sediment of Challenger Deep. Chemical signatures, biological mysteries, geological clues waiting to be discovered. The deep ocean is a time capsule, preserving evidence of Earth's history. Chapter 8. Sound, Motion, and Time. Sound travels farther and faster underwater than it does in air, making the ocean an acoustic world where distance is measured in echoes. Whales use this property to communicate across entire ocean basins. The deep ocean absorbs much of the noise from the surface. Storms that rage above barely disturb the stillness below. The trench is insulated from the chaos of the surface world by kilometers of water. Surface waves, no matter how violent, diminish rapidly with depth. By the time you reach the trench, the ocean is calm, utterly still, unaffected by the motion above. Currents in the trench move extremely slowly, creeping along at speeds measured in centimeters per hour. These sluggish flows are driven by subtle differences in temperature and salinity rather than wind or waves. The sediment that covers the trench floor falls like snow, drifting down from the surface in a constant gentle rain that takes weeks or months to settle. This marine snow is the only motion visible in the darkness. Change in the trench happens over centuries. A footprint left on the seafloor could remain undisturbed for decades, perhaps longer. The deep ocean is a place where time moves differently. Stillness defines the trench. It is a place of profound quiet, where motion is rare and sudden movement almost unknown. The water is so still it feels solid, like suspended gel rather than liquid. The darkness never lifts. There is no dawn here, no sunset, no rhythm of day and night, only endless, unchanging black. The concept of time becomes meaningless without the sun to mark its passage. The trench exists outside of human time. It operates on geological scales, where 1,000 years is a moment and 1,000,000 years merely a chapter in an ongoing story. In the Mariana Trench, the Earth breathes slowly. The planet's deep processes, subduction, recycling, creation, unfold at a pace beyond human perception, playing out over spans of time we can barely comprehend. Chapter 9. Why it matters. The Mariana Trench shows us the extremes of our planet, the outer limits of pressure, depth, and darkness that exist on Earth. It represents the absolute boundary of one of our planet's fundamental dimensions. It proves that life can adapt to almost anywhere, that biology is more resilient and creative than we ever imagined. If life exists in Challenger Deep, what other seemingly impossible places might harbour living things? The trench helps scientists study plate tectonics, providing a natural laboratory for understanding how continents move and mountains form. Subduction zones like the Mariana Trench are fundamental to Earth's geology. It reveals the limits of human exploration, reminding us that despite our technology, vast portions of our own planet remain inaccessible. We have been to the moon, but the deep ocean remains largely unknown. The trench demonstrates human curiosity, the drive to explore, to understand, to reach places no one has ever been. That curiosity has driven every descent, every mission, every attempt to know the unknowable, most of the Mariana Trench remains unexplored, unmapped, unseen by human eyes or cameras. We have surveyed perhaps 1% of the trench's area in any detail. The trench protects unknown ecosystems, species that exist nowhere else, evolutionary experiments that have been running for millions of years. How many species live there that science has never documented? It reminds us of Earth's true depth, the vast vertical dimension of our planet that we so often forget when we think only of its surface. The ocean is not just wide, it's deep beyond imagining. The ocean holds many secrets, and the Mariana Trench is perhaps the deepest secret of all, a place that symbolizes everything we don't yet know about our own world. The Mariana Trench is Earth's deepest silence. It is a place of rest, of stillness, of profound and absolute quiet. It is where the planet itself seems to pause and breathe. Chapter 10. The Creatures of the Abyss. Among the strangest inhabitants of the trench are the snailfish, delicate, creatures that somehow survive at depths that would destroy most other vertebrates. Their bodies are almost gelatinous, lacking scales, with bones that are thin and flexible. These snailfish represent one of the deepest living vertebrates ever discovered, recorded at depths exceeding 8,000 meters. They move slowly through the water, ghostly and translucent, feeding on tiny crustaceans. The amphipods of the deep are scavengers, tiny shrimp-like organisms that swarm over any food that reaches the bottom. They've been found in the stomachs of snailfish, and they themselves feed on whatever organic material settles on the seafloor. Some amphipods in the trench grow unusually large compared to their shallow water cousins, a phenomenon called deep-sea gigantism. In the absence of predators and with stable conditions, they can afford to grow slowly over long lifespans. Sea cucumbers crawl across the trench floor, processing sediment as they move, extracting any remaining nutrients from the mud. They're like earthworms of the deep sea, recycling organic matter. These sea cucumbers leave trails behind them in the sediment, visible in photographs taken by deep-sea cameras. These trails can persist for years, marking the passage of creatures that move at glacial speeds. Foraminifera, single-celled organisms with shells, live in the sediment of the trench. Despite being microscopic, they're incredibly important, helping scientists understand the conditions at the bottom through their abundance and diversity. Bacteria thrive in the trench sediment, some of them living off chemical energy from the rocks themselves. These microbes represent some of the most ancient forms of life on Earth, unchanged for billions of years. Some bacteria in the trench can break down substances that would be toxic to most other life forms. They exist in a realm of extreme chemistry, processing compounds in ways we're only beginning to understand. The life in the Mariana Trench is sparse, but resilient. Unlike the abundance of tropical reefs or kelp forests, the trench supports relatively few organisms per square meter, but those that live there are supremely adapted to their environment. Chapter 11. The Weight of Water. To truly understand the pressure at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, imagine every square inch of your body bearing the weight of 50 jumbo jets. That's the force pressing down on the seafloor at Challenger Deep. Water itself becomes denser under such pressure. The water at the bottom of the trench is slightly more compressed than the water at the surface, making it marginally heavier and more viscous. This density difference means that the ocean doesn't mix as easily as you might think. The deep water tends to stay deep, separated from surface waters by subtle but important differences in temperature and salinity. The pressure affects everything, even sound. Underwater sounds travel at different speeds depending on depth, creating acoustic layers in the ocean that can channel sound for enormous distances. If you could somehow survive at the bottom of the trench without protection, the pressure would force water into your tissues, collapsing your lungs and crushing your organs in an instant. Death would be instantaneous. Yet the creatures that live there experience no discomfort. They've never known anything different. The pressure is simply their normal, as natural to them as atmospheric pressure is to us. When scientists bring deep-sea creatures to the surface, many of them die not from decompression exactly, but from the heat and the sudden availability of oxygen, which can actually be toxic to organisms adapted to cold oxygen-poor environments. The pressure at these depths changes the very chemistry of seawater. Chemical reactions that would never occur at the surface become possible. Minerals dissolve and precipitate in unusual ways. Even the rocks at the bottom are affected. The immense pressure creates unique mineral formations, crystals that could never form under normal conditions. The weight of water is what makes the trench what it is, a place defined by pressure, shaped by it, existing because of it. Without that crushing force, the trench would be just another part of the seafloor. Chapter 12. Volcanic Activity. The Mariana Trench sits at the boundary of immense geological forces, and not far from the trench itself, underwater volcanoes rise from the seafloor. These are part of the Mariana Volcanic Arc, created by the same subduction that formed the trench. As the Pacific Plate descends beneath the Mariana Plate, it releases water trapped in its minerals. This water rises into the overlying mantle, lowering the melting point of rock and creating magma. That magma rises to form underwater volcanoes, some of which breach the surface as islands. The Mariana Islands themselves, Guam, Saipan and others, are the visible peaks of this volcanic chain. Hydrothermal vents occur along some parts of the trench system, places where superheated water erupts from the seafloor. These vents create oases of life in the deep ocean, supporting ecosystems based on chemical energy rather than sunlight. The water from these vents can reach temperatures exceeding 300 degrees Celsius, yet it doesn't boil because of the immense pressure. It erupts as a shimmering plume of mineral-rich fluid. Around these vents, unique life forms cluster. Tube worms, clams, and specialized bacteria that can survive in conditions that seem more like another planet than Earth. These ecosystems exist entirely independently of the sun. The minerals dissolved in vent water precipitate as they meet cold seawater, forming chimneys and deposits on the seafloor. These structures grow over time, sometimes reaching heights of dozens of meters. The volcanic activity near the trench is ongoing. New vents open, old ones close. The seafloor is constantly being reshaped by the forces beneath it. Earthquakes associated with this volcanic activity can be powerful, though most occur too deep to cause significant tsunamis. The descending plate occasionally catches and then suddenly slips, releasing energy built up over decades. This volcanic and seismic activity makes the Mariana region one of the most geologically dynamic places on Earth, a landscape in constant slow-motion transformation. Chapter 13. The Journey Down. Imagine beginning a descent to Challenger Deep. You board your submersible at the surface, where sunlight glitters on the waves and the water is a brilliant blue. The first 100 meters pass quickly. Light still penetrates here, though the colors begin to shift. Red wavelengths disappear first, filtered out by the water, making everything appear blue-green. At 200 meters you enter the twilight zone. The light is dim, ghostly, just enough to see shadows but not details. This is where many fish migrate daily, rising to feed at night and descending to hide during the day. By 1,000 meters you're in complete darkness. Your submersible's lights create a small bubble of illumination, but beyond that, nothing. The pressure has already multiplied tenfold since the surface. The descent continues. 2,000 meters, 3,000. The walls of the submersible creak as the pressure increases, though they're designed to withstand far more. Outside, the darkness is absolute. At 4,000 meters, you're deeper than the vast majority of the ocean floor. You've passed beyond the abyssal plains into the Hadal zone, named after Hades, the Greek underworld. 5,000 meters, 6,000. The pressure is now more than 600 times atmospheric pressure. Any weakness in your vessel would be catastrophic, but the engineering holds. 7,000 meters down, and you're approaching the depth of the deepest trenches in most oceans. But the Mariana Trench goes much deeper still. You're only about 2/3 of the way down. 8,000 meters, 9,000. The darkness outside is so complete that your lights seem to be absorbed by it, creating only a small sphere of visibility. At 10,000 meters, you can sense the bottom approaching. Your sonar pings more rapidly, the return echoes arriving sooner. The sediment floor comes into view, pale and smooth. And then, finally, after hours of descent, you touch down at Challenger Deep. Nearly 11 kilometers below the surface, the deepest point on Earth, you've arrived at the bottom of the world. Chapter 14. What We've Found. The first humans to reach Challenger Deep in 1960 reported seeing flatfish on the bottom. This observation was initially doubted, but subsequent missions have confirmed that fish do indeed live at these extreme depths. Later expeditions found amphipods, those small crustaceans, thriving in abundance. When bait was lowered to the bottom, swarms of amphipods appeared within hours, proving that life actively scavenges on the trench floor. Scientists have collected sediment samples containing bacteria that can survive the pressure and cold. Some of these bacteria are unique to the deep ocean, while others are related to species found in other extreme environments. Plastic bags and candy wrappers have been photographed at Challenger Deep, disturbing evidence that human pollution has reached even this remote location. Microplastics have been found in the tissues of deep-sea creatures. Strange jellyfish have been filmed drifting through the water column above the trench, their translucent bodies pulsing slowly as they filter feed on particles. Sea cucumbers of unusual species have been observed, some of them swimming rather than crawling, an adaptation that allows them to move between food sources more efficiently. The sediment itself tells a story. Core samples reveal layers representing millions of years of accumulation, with each layer capturing a moment in Earth's history. Volcanic, eruptions, climate changes, even meteor impacts. Chemical analysis of trench water has revealed unique compounds, some produced by bacteria, others resulting from the pressure and geological activity. The chemistry of the deep ocean is fundamentally different from surface waters. Cameras have captured bioluminescent displays in the water column above the trench, brief flashes of light in the darkness as creatures communicate or hunt. Every expedition brings back new data, new images, new questions. Each visit reveals how little we truly know about the deepest parts of our ocean. Chapter 15. The Silence. If you could sit at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, protected somehow from the pressure and cold, the first thing you'd notice is the silence. Not the silence of an empty room, but something deeper, heavier. A silence that has physical presence, that presses in on you along with the water. There are no sounds from the surface world down here. No crashing waves, no boat engines, no whale songs from the sunlit zones. All of that is absorbed, filtered out, lost in the kilometers of water above. What sounds do exist are subtle. The faint ping of active sonar from a research vessel, transmitted through the water as a low-frequency pulse. The occasional creak and groan of geological movement as the tectonic plates shift minutely against one another. These sounds are so low in frequency that you might feel them more than hear them. Perhaps the rustle of sediment as a sea cucumber crawls past, processing the mud, leaving its trail. But even that sound is muffled, dampened by the water and pressure. The silence is so profound that it becomes almost oppressive. Humans are not meant for such quiet. We're creatures of sound, using it to navigate and communicate and understand our world. In the trench, that sensory input is stripped away. You're left with only yourself, only your breathing inside your submersible, only the hum of life support systems. It's said that the deeper silence makes you aware of sounds you'd never otherwise notice. The rush of blood through your veins, the whisper of your breath, the subtle creaks of your joints. The trench offers that kind of silence, multiplied 1,000 times. It's the silence of deep space, the silence of the void. It's the sound of being nowhere, of being beyond the world. Chapter 16. Time in the Deep. At the bottom of the Mariana Trench, time functions differently, or rather, it ceases to function in any meaningful way. Without the sun to mark days, without tides to measure hours, without seasonal changes to track years, time becomes abstract, theoretical. The creatures of the trench have no circadian rhythms. They don't wake with the dawn or sleep at night because there is no dawn, no night. There is only the endless now. A piece of wood that falls to the trench floor might lie there for centuries before fully decomposing. The cold water and lack of oxygen slow decay to a crawl. Sediment accumulates at rates measured in millimeters per 1,000 years. The layer of mud beneath the submersible might represent 100,000 years of slow, patient accumulation. The geological processes that form the trench operate on timescales of millions of years. What seems permanent to human perception is actually in constant, infinitesimally slow motion. If you could watch the trench in time-lapse, speeding up millions of years into minutes, you'd see it writhe and shift, deepening and moving as the plates collide. But in real time, in human time, nothing seems to change. The bottom is as it was yesterday, as it will be tomorrow. The darkness doesn't lighten, the pressure doesn't ease. This timelessness is part of what makes the trench so alien. We're creatures who live in time, who measure our lives in days and years. The trench exists outside that framework. In the Mariana Trench, 1,000 years ago is indistinguishable from today. 1,000 years from now will be the same. The trench simply is, eternal and unchanging. Chapter 17. Resting in the Abyss. The darkness has settled completely now. You've descended as far as it's possible to go on this planet, to the very bottom of the world. There is no movement here, no sound. The trench remains unseen, as it has for millions of years, as it will for millions more. Far above, life continues. The sun rises and sets. Waves break on distant shores. Children play in the surf. Ships cross the ocean. But here, at the deepest point, none of that matters. None of it reaches down this far. The trench simply exists, patient and timeless. And now, so do you, suspended in the deepest darkness, cradled by pressure, surrounded by the weight of the entire ocean. You are as far from the surface as it's possible to be. You are at the bottom of the world. Let yourself rest here. Let the silence hold you. Let the pressure surround you like a blanket, heavy and constant. There is nothing to do here, nothing to accomplish. No decisions to make, only the quiet, the dark, the stillness. The trench will remain patient and eternal, long after you've drifted into sleep. It has been here for millions of years. It will be here for millions more. Time has no meaning in the deep. Rest now. Let the ocean take your weight. Let the darkness soften around you. The Mariana Trench keeps its secrets, and for tonight, you are one of them. Good night.